Okay, I've got 1:30. Welcome to the Wicked Smart webinar, How to Successfully Market to Millennials. I'm excited to throw this over to Andy, who's going to introduce us to our presenter today, who is one of our friends and expert in one of our Midwest family markets. So Andy, have at it.
All right, well, welcome to another Wicked Smart webinar. We had we changed some technology in the background, so I think we may have some issues with registrations today, so people might be getting on a little bit late. But I am happy to be talking, have Zach on here today to talk about the topic of marketing to millennials, because I know it is a pain point for a lot of businesses, especially if the business is run by generations that aren't millennials. So he had done a training with us internally about a month ago or so, and I felt it was fantastic. So I wanted to ask him to come on and share that training with you. This will be recorded. We'll go on our YouTube channel, so you will have access to this. So Zack is in our Michigan office. He is the Vice President of Engagement and Experience. And without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Zack East.
Thanks, Andy. It's an awful lot of stuff to live up to when you're a quote-unquote expert, but as you'll find out here, part of the reason that I can, I suppose, be called an expert on this subject is because I am living the millennial life as it is. So we'll dive into that in a bit. Today's material is mostly going to come from some information presented from millennial expert Matt Britton. Matt Britton is a pretty dynamic speaker. He's a CEO of his own company. He's done a great deal of work over many years to make sure that businesses and organizations understand who millennial consumers are. He's the author of a book, Youth Nation, Building Remarkable Brands in a Youth-Driven Culture. And there is a podcast featuring him and our business partners at Barbell and Associates, as well as a very short book introduction video that'll give you the basics as to what Youth Nation is about. And that is at that website address there, midwestfamily.swm.com/millennial-marketing. Go ahead and move forward here, Andy. And what we're going to talk about today, so you have a visual concept of where people are in their generational steps. If you take a look at the far right side, you'll see all of the different folks who are part of each generation that are currently active here in the United States in particular. That's what we're talking about. According to Pew Research from 2019, these are generally the ages and years in which each of these generations were born and what their names happen to be. Of course, people do graduate further into, and we name different kinds of generations as they come about. The current one and youngest one happens to be Gen Z. So you'll hear us refer to Gen Z, but most of our discussion today is going to be about millennials. And they are ages 23 to 38. So they are a pretty important part of your business, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. Go ahead and flip forward here. So who are millennials and how did we get here exactly? How did those millennials get to be the most talked about generation lately? Whether that's positive or whether it's been that we've made fun of millennials. Well, technology simply has changed their lives. Accessibility has changed their lives. Accessibility meaning the ability to get to technology. In the 80s, 70s, and other eras, technology, of course, wasn't as proliferating every portion of our society as it is now. And it wasn't as cheap and easy to obtain as it is now. Well, for the millennial who grew up in the 80s and 90s, more of that technology became more accessible and more of it became cheap. And as it became more accessible and cheap, that meant that most of our lives started surrounding and revolving around technology. So in addition to consuming brands and following brands, they've also become their own brands because technology has allowed them to do so, social media in particular, which we'll also touch on as well. And their ability to drive demand through technology has produced a pretty unique marketing challenge, which is why we're here today. We need to talk about how to speak to these consumers and how your business strategizes to do so in particular. Let's go ahead and move forward and look again at who. I know you're probably freaking out a little bit because you might think it's going to be pretty difficult to reach millennials. They're everywhere, they're fragmented. I don't understand them because I might be in a different generation, maybe even twice removed from this generation of people. Don't worry and do not fret. What I can tell you is that you can reach millennials through the help of your Midwest family rep, through the help of your strategization, and with authenticity. And with a little education on who they are and how we got here as well. Because if you're armed with the education, you know, of course, where to start, or at least what place to go with, how to develop your strategy and move your business forward. So millennials are simply not kids anymore. They are your most important customer. That is a quote directly from Matt Britton himself. And the reason is, as most of us know, in the consumer profiles and in advertising in general, most of the people coveted are in the 25 to 54 age group. They are now the money demo, as you saw in that group of generations in the Pew Research slide a while back there. They are generally right there in the sweet spot of where advertisers need to be reaching the consumers who have the greatest amount of pull on their ability to drive your business forward in growth. And they'll especially continue that as we go through the next several years. So keep that in mind if you're taking in today's information and think that maybe it's not as important as it might be. It truly is, and that's why we're spending time on it today. And millennials are that audience right now. Let's go ahead and move forward and look at the target. I am your target. I am what I like to call an old millennial, which isn't a term, but I've just made it up because I feel old and I am a millennial. I'm 36, I'm college educated, I have a lot of debt, I don't own a house, my partner and I are not married and we don't intend on getting married, and we have no kids. So those are all things that you've heard about millennial tropes that exist in the world about how we don't want to do the same things the Gen Xers and boomers and silent generation folks might want to do. But I am your target consumer, so you do have to understand a little bit about how my mind works and what it does for me to get through a purchasing funnel to eventually become a loyal user of your brand. And by the way, I post too many photos of my dog on Instagram. Big surprise there. We're pretty much all doing that these days. It's the only thing we have going for us if we're not going anywhere. So let's talk a little more about the problem that exists for millennials and the reason why you might need to understand why millennials are in the financial situations that they're in, why they're in the economic situations. Well, economic and financial situations, of course, tied to each other, and in some cases, social situations that they're in, is really based on the fact that we are in a barbell economy now more than ever. As you see on the left, there's prosperity, there's disparity. Those who are stuck in the middle often don't have very much to work with. They have a little more than those on their disparate side. But again, we're seeing a whole lot of people going to one end or another in the spectrum. And for a lot of millennials, a high majority of them are a lot closer to disparity than they are prosperity. Factors in this is that it's simply true. Millennials simply have less to work with than their Gen X and Boomer counterparts. For example, my parents went bankrupt at the time that I was about ready to make my decision to go to college. All of that burden of going to college ended up on me. And I don't resent my parents for it one bit, but it is a factor in how I end up living my life going forward and knowing what I'm going to have to do, say in the first 5 to 10 years after I graduated school, planning how I'm going to deal with my debt, how I'm going to make purchases, budgets, when I'm going to be able to buy a house, when I'm going to make further investments. Those are realities that have happened to this generation. Their purchasing behavior, trust of brands, and even buying cycles have also changed. So if you're extremely used to seeing boomer and silent generation and even Gen X customers in your businesses, their buying cycles are in some cases different than yours, and their purchasing behavior is simply different than those of millennials. So let's move forward to our next slide and see more factors involved here, in that their purchasing habits are also producing that barbell effect, as you saw. And that means you have to also deal with the barbell effect of how people buy from you that are on the prosperity end or the disparity end of that barbell. And that means you've got to put your services and products together to match what those people are buying. So if you have more millennials on the disparate end of that barbell economy, it makes things pretty interesting when you're trying to put together what your next generation of products and services are. And what's interesting about all this is, as you saw in the barbell picture that was there, those mid-level brands are also suffering. Those who have put themselves in the middle. Here's what's happening. Millennials are trying to find a way to relate to brands and use brands and enjoy brands and have experiences with brands based not on the middle, but on value or luxury. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what that means exactly. Here's a perfect example. And again, this is a slide that was produced by Matt Britton himself, so I don't claim to be the expert on any of these products myself, but he does raise a good point, because I went immediately to the grocery store after I saw this when he presented it, and it is 100% true. You'll see the prices at the bottom, the labels in the middle and at the top, and you'll see on the Purex side on the left, that's our value brand, not only in price, but also in brand. It's also a perceived value because it's not as well known as, say, Tide, that's in the middle. But for millennials, what's interesting about Tide is we were exposed to Procter & Gamble advertising for many, many years of our childhood and teenage years, that the middle is still recognizable to us and it's comfortable to purchase, but it's not as interesting as what happens when you get to the luxury end of a purchase, which is the Method laundry detergent. It costs $20. There's a lot less of it to be had, but the experience and enjoying that beautiful pink lavender smell that makes your clothes come out better, and it has different ingredients that are less harmful to the environment, is something millennials like, enjoy, and want to experience in the products that they buy. So they'll spend the money to do it. So let's move forward to the next slide and see factors based on value. Value brands are typically a utility. They get the job done. You can have a lot of products and services in your line of business that are utility. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a bit, to make sure you do have some utility pieces and parts of your brand with products and services. But there is no experience to their usage, unless, of course, it's used to create a meme about how terrible it is. And that is something that people do if something is truly awful. For example, if you've ever been on the website wish.com, or perhaps flown through Amazon to find something that is very simple and cheap and everyday, like, say, a screwdriver, it's interesting to come up with a whole lot of results that you don't quite know which one to choose. But the cheapest one isn't, of course, always the one that's going to hold up, or it might not even have the right language on it, and a whole bunch of other things that turns into a meme and makes it pretty interesting to the millennial about how terrible it is. But it does still serve a utility. It is still a value brand. It's still got the job done. Mid-level brands are usually familiar, and there's no real brand loyalty that's been developed. It's just kind of there. Everyone is familiar with it, but they're not quite sure if it's right for them because mom and dad used it, grandma used it, grandpa used it. Maybe my aunts and uncles use it. I'm not so sure if I want to be there. Experience with those brands are based on comfort, and they oftentimes are going to end up being something that people just simply choose because they don't want to take the time to make a choice on the value side or the luxury side. Let's go ahead and move forward to the next slide and treat yourself. It's one of my favorite parts of Parks and Recreation. Great show that's now streaming quite a bit on Netflix, and I think is one of the top 10 consistently on Netflix these days. And the reason I use that slide is because Tom and Donna that are in that show often talk about the luxury brands that they enjoy. And they, in fact, are millennials portrayed in their characters in that show. And luxury brands offer me the best experience, where they make me feel the best based on what that brand has to offer. Again, you go back to Method, and that laundry detergent that Method produces, again, has a different fragrance, different aroma, different color, different packaging that looks engaging and exciting. But it also comes with all of these ingredients that Tide and Purex don't have, that make me feel good about helping the environment, about knowing that there aren't a bunch of things perhaps going into this rivers and streams that would be harmful to the environment. Those are things that are important to the cause marketing of what luxury brands like Method have done to push their products. Now, luxury brands are also used to gather impressions. What do I mean by impressions? Well, luxury brands and experiences bring social media clout. As we've seen, most of what people do on social media is post pictures of things, again, they're either making fun of or that they really enjoy and had a great experience with, or they want to show off. When's the last time you got the chance to rent a really nice car? Well, before COVID. And maybe you chose something that wasn't, the typical sedan. You ended up going for the Camaro or something that was on the lot. It might be pretty worthy of an Instagram picture that you might flaunt to the rest of your friends and family. Get them to think you spent some money on a car. And you didn't. Let's move to the next slide here and talk more about the interesting places in which we can plot all of some familiar brands that you probably can see. Take a look at what's in each of these grids. You might see some brands that are familiar to you. You might see some that are not familiar to you at all. Some of them market differently and in using different methods of marketing, whether it be mass awareness or a great deal of niche marketing, directly to the groups that are going to use them the most within the millennial audience. But they're based in 4 quadrants: luxury, experience, value, and utility, all things that we've talked about. So you'll get the chance to take a look at that again at some point. You can certainly search for it on the internet if you want to stare at it deeply and kind of go, oh yeah, I see where Netflix is both value and experience for me. I'm getting a great experience and I enjoy the value from it. Much the same way that Airbnb gives me a great experience, but it's often a lot more than getting a hotel room. But I really enjoy the experience of renting an entire beach house as opposed to renting a hotel room. So that leaves me in that quadrant. If you take a look at Starbucks, just above the experience realm, you'll see they're mostly in the experience and luxury quadrant. We all know about Peloton for the most part because of their massive amount of marketing that they do pretty much all over the place. And they are for sure a luxury brand because it is not cheap to get a Peloton bike and it is not cheap to have the subscription to use it. But you get a good experience out of it if you are the person who enjoys biking and getting a great workout in. Take a look at the other quadrant on the left side. You see Apple, again, high in the luxury brand, but a great deal of utility that comes out of that brand. Same with Uber, same with Amazon Prime. In the utility and value quadrant at the bottom left, you see some brands that might be fairly familiar to you. I think everybody has either gone into an IKEA, experienced an IKEA, or been on something or used something that's an IKEA piece of furniture. You know that is straight up utility, and it is really good value. So take a look at that quadrant at some point in time in the future here. If we want to move forward to the next slide, what I want to challenge you to do, maybe not right now, but in the very near future, is decide where your brand is on the spectrum. Can you identify products or services in your business that might be value, mid-level, or luxury? And then again, have that moment to assess your brand with your Midwest Family rep after this. And they can help you kind of decide where your products, services, and overall brand fall within those quadrants. Go ahead and move to the next slide here, Andy, and let's talk about status. Status updates are the new status symbol, according to Matt Britton, and the new currency is no longer a collection of stuff for chasing the American dream. For the millennial, it is likes and shares. How many impressions are you going to make today? So as we talked about Instagram earlier and how much I enjoy pretty much just posting pictures of my dog, Andy, you can move to the next slide and we'll talk about did it for the Instagram, or DIFTY. An example of that is people in Russia, well, before the pandemic, of course, were renting grounded private jets just so they could take Instagram photos. In the world of Photoshop these days, you may not even need to do that anymore because you can pretty much Photoshop yourself into just about anything these days without actually going and getting the experience. Though you do want to have some people along maybe for the ride to verify that that experience occurred if you're going to throw it on social media and say that it happened. Another example is a national park that used to have a nice mountaintop and a pretty good amount of traffic that came to it that suddenly started getting overwhelmed because social media was blowing up with pictures of people on the top of this mountaintop that was pretty easy to hike to, and suddenly it started getting an influx of millennials coming in to take pictures for their experiences. The color run is another experience example for millennials. There's no timing and winning and medals and anything to come out of the color run other than to simply have a social media picture in the end, or whatever happened with the colors you ran through and what you turned out looking like in your white shirt full of different powdered colors. And if you've ever used augmented reality and filters like the things on Snapchat and Instagram, or even the augmented reality of using an app that allows you to place furniture in your room before it even gets there so you can see what it looks like. A lot of millennials love that opportunity and are using that quite a bit to create experiences or to make purchasing decisions, especially if they are luxury brands. Let's go ahead and move forward to our next slide. And one of the things you're going to need as a visual to help you understand the next bit of information is that we have to talk about the customer journey. For those of you who are on this call today, and let's say that you don't work very deeply with your Midwest family rep or with any part of, say, Midwest Digital or Dash Digital Services in Southwest Michigan and South Bend, or any other parts of Midwest family, and let's say you're simply just doing some social media work and not a lot more. You don't have an awareness strategy on the radio. You're not using a bunch of PPC or website work that you're doing, or you're not producing branded content. You're not paying attention to your reviews. Today is the day I want to wake you up to how important this customer journey is. This is one of many types of customer journey examples that are out there on the internet. Vendasta Marketing produced this one, and I think it's the cleanest and nicest. And if you take a look down the line, you'll see some things that you're very familiar with. Social media and radio and TV, billboard, magazine, newspaper, all on the left side in the awareness funnel for mass amounts of audiences that you need to reach on a frequent and consistent basis. All the way over to advocacy, all the way on the other end after a purchase has taken place, and those folks become advocates for your brand. All of these parts of the customer journey are going to be important in this conversation. Let's go ahead and move forward, Dandy. And let's talk about reaching these consumers. On the left, at the time that I was putting this together, and it still happens to a degree, every commercial that was being produced by a major national brand usually started with "in these uncertain times." It is the worst phrase right now to come out of COVID-19. It's almost as bad as "for all of your blank needs." Just awfully, awfully cliche. Now, reaching these consumers, they need to know the brand first. Millennials are driven, just like anybody else, by frequency and consistency through great messaging. So if you don't have any awareness funnel occurring right now, that is really step one in helping to make sure that you get that brand to be at least known enough for people, millennials in particular, to take further action down the funnel or down the customer journey forward. The next biggest thing, but the thing that will probably take the most work, is to get your digital house in order. If you are not happy with your website, you're doing terribly in search results, your social media channels are not where they need to be, you're not posting on a consistent and frequent basis with authentic things that people need to know about your business, your product, your brand, your employees. Those are things to start working on immediately. And when you do make those posts, show meaningful, useful things and tell stories, authentic stories, stories that matter, but not stories that feel like people are being sold to, which is an adage that we've talked about so much in any level of advertising, really since the day that any amount of advertising started in a newspaper or otherwise. And it still holds true today, but more now more than ever, because people know when they're being sold. So get those authentic stories together. Be transparent about your online reviews. If you are ignoring your Google My Business account and not paying attention to your Google reviews, your Facebook reviews, if you use services like Angie's List or Yelp for your business and you're not paying attention to those reviews, pay attention to them especially. And the reason why is because millennials in particular use those as part of the process further down the customer journey to make their decision on whether or not they will begin to give credibility and trust to your brand and get further down the purchasing funnel to make a purchase. It is important to them. Please make sure that you pay attention to those reviews. No, you can't scrub them. No, you can't change them, but you can respond to them in most cases on most platforms. At least be able to show some level of appreciation for the positive reviews and concern for those who need a further touch to talk about their negative reviews. Write branded content and receive earned media. Tell authentic stories in those earned media pieces and branded content as well. So always pay attention to that. That is extremely important as well. If you don't know what branded content is, we'll talk about that in just a bit. And make it really easy to buy. Consider putting the best-selling items and services on e-commerce online shopping carts, especially right now. If you're concerned about how people are able to get to you physically, now is the time to go open a very simple, tiny little shopping cart with your most used products and services that are easy to sell and ship, or easy for people to come pick up, maybe even without contact, or I should say contactless. And remove friction from the buying process. So let's stop right here. Go to the next slide, Andy. And we will go to the next slide again. We need to stop and talk for a moment about friction. What is friction? Well, millennials and Gen Z loathe friction in their buying process. I speak from experience. There are many instances that have occurred where people I've done business with for years have started causing friction during and post-COVID-19 reopenings because they've done a terrible job of doing all the things we're about to talk about. So what is friction? Friction, simply defined, is making the consumer do all the hard work to figure out how to do business with you. If they have to be the one to do all the hard work of finding your phone number, is it the right phone number? Is it in the right place on Google My Business? No, it's different there than it is on social media. Maybe your website address is different now than it was too, and your hours have changed and we don't know that much. Oh wait, now your services and products have changed too because COVID has meant that your supply chain shut down certain things you used to do before COVID and blah, 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 blah. If it's difficult for me to figure out what you're offering, when you're offering it, and how I can buy it from you, that's friction. Let's remove it. Friction in the buying process leads to bad reviews and consumers doing business with a competitor because someone else might have less friction in their buying process. Don't lose out to your competitor because of friction in the buying process. We don't want them to jump ship or exit your buying funnel, your purchasing funnel. Let's go ahead and move forward, Andy. Let's talk about friction a little bit more. There are areas to address if you think you might have friction. First, assess your purchase funnel. If you don't know what the experience is like for a customer to purchase from you, use a secret shopper. What is a secret shopper? It can be a friend or family member that your employees don't know, who don't know you, that they assume doesn't know you, who can then report back to you about the experience that they had. 100% to you. Yeah, there might be a little bit of bias there, but secret shoppers really do help to give you an idea of what the purchasing experience is like. You can also find that out, of course, using customer surveys through your databases of people to talk to tell you what the customer experience is like and improve that customer experience model. If you've got some issues further down the line, change whatever it is. Remove people from the process who are maybe not as great at handling customer interactions. And this is the big one. Clearly communicate products and services, processes, safety, and brand updates really clearly. Here's an example. I have a person that I do business with that just reopened past COVID, and all day long they post things on social media that are cutesy and that are just kind of there and they don't really matter. Here's a picture of an employee, you know, with their mask on and they're cleaning a part of the desk. That's great. It's very nice. I appreciate seeing those things. But what I didn't get out of that customer experience with that particular brand is I had an appointment set with them. And before I was about to take that appointment and actually physically go in to do business with them, they didn't really prepare me for what I'm about to encounter when I get to their place of business. So when I eventually showed up for the appointment, the hours available were different. The business was open with more people inside than what I would feel safe being around, especially with a small enclosed area. Not everybody was wearing masks. None of those things were communicated to me. And if I'm immunocompromised, or perhaps a loved one who's taking this appointment and I'm helping them out happens to be in that situation, that's a lot of information I would have wanted communicated. And that's going to leave me a lot of friction for the future and leaves me open to start being up for grabs as a person who's going to go purchase from a competitor. Make sure all points of contact, sorry, Andy, could you go back just a second there? Make sure all points of contact and important info, again, match across all channels. So check your Google My Business, check your social media channels, check your website. Make sure all of it matches the way it's supposed to. Let's go ahead and move forward. Let's talk about reaching these consumers. After you've gotten through what sounds like a mountain of stuff you've got to clean up, but once you get there, it's easy to keep it going and keep it running and keep it positive and keep the experiences positive for people enough that loyalty and trust is coming for your purchase down the purchase funnel. If you have made all of those changes to make not only millennials, but boomers and any other generational folks who are doing business with you feel like they know everything they're going to get in the process, it's a positive experience, you've communicated well to them, there's less friction in the buying process, that builds trust all the way further down the customer journey, and of course comes into purchase territory. Now, post-purchase, you need to build loyalty. Encourage sharing that satisfaction that that customer had on social media. Ask them to write a positive review for you. Maybe even ask them to be part of your email marketing campaigns so that you can make them part of your core group of customers that you want to talk to later about different opportunities and offers. Reward referrals and invite them to events for experiences, even if those events are virtual right now and you're not interested in having people in a physical space. Virtual events like showing up on Zoom or doing a Facebook Live where people can tune in and watch at a certain time definitely do work at this moment in time to still be an experience for people who are having engagement with your brand. Let's go ahead and move forward, Andy. Let's look long term. During COVID-19 reduced hours, do not reinvent your wheel unless that wheel was failing before the pandemic. In some cases, we at Midwest Family in Michigan here are actually reinventing 2 different wheels that I can name off the top of my head, because they just weren't working before the pandemic. So it became kind of the perfect time to reinvent those wheels. But now we have to do the great job of doing all the things we just talked about, making sure the customer experience is amazing, making sure the brand and what it's about and what it does and its benefits for the consumer are all communicated well and across all channels. So if you are going to make changes, make those things very clear to the consumer when you do make those changes, and show what the positive is in those changes as well. And make small improvements where needed. If you're doing something right now that's working really well, just make sure you communicate it better to people. Advertise it more. Get a better marketing strategy behind it. You will see better success with it. For the future, begin to millennialize and pandemic-proof your business a bit more. And what I mean by that is, again, if you don't have, say, your best products and services online for people to purchase, if you are in a line of business in which you can do something like that, consider making steps to get there, especially when we don't necessarily know what the next 6 months is going to bring for us in terms of the waves of pandemic, closures and openings and phases in different parts and pieces of the country. Now, other looking long-term advice, if you have any parts of the customer journey that are solely in need of help, focus on those areas. Make investments. I know now that right now is not necessarily the time you want to spend a great deal of money, but it is the time to start thinking about making investments in places where, again, you were already maybe not doing well or failing at, or not doing a great job of communicating or being a part of before the pandemic started. Make those investments all together now when you have the opportunity to help reshuffle, remake your brand into something amazing, especially for this millennial audience. But don't fake your way to authenticity. And what I mean by that is, all of the things that you hope to communicate to people and the changes that you make, or the positivity of what you're doing to make your business better and make it more of an experience to work with everybody, but especially millennials, is you've got to be authentic. And if that means that you don't feel like you can relate, then you've got to end up talking about hiring those who are in the millennial generation who do understand how to relate to those you hope to sell to. And add products and services that matter to the millennial. And if you don't know what those are, ask your audience, ask your customers. Your audience is that group of people you can find in your social media channels and your newsletter audience. If you're blasting things through Constant Contact or MailChimp, to talk to those folks every once in a while, ask them what it is that would be important to them. Matt Britton makes a lot of great suggestions about how to make over different parts of your business very easily to speak more to what millennials are looking for in terms of having experiences and many other things that are important to them. And one of them is be interactive. So any time that you can involve them in experiences and events and games in particular, trivia, anything with Facebook Live, videos you're doing, contests you're doing. And by contests, I don't mean like, share, and comment. Those things are really frowned upon on social media. The algorithm hates it. Do actual real contests that don't feel fake to people, that makes them feel as though they've got a reasonable chance of winning, and that they don't have to publicly show everyone their entry. Be utilitarian as well. Be useful to their lives. You have to have some parts of your business that are utilitarian. If you're not useful to their lives in some way, and it doesn't have to be on a mass scale, you'll probably have better chance of reaching more people if it's on a mass scale in terms of what you're offering to be utilitarian. But you have to have at least some parts of your product line or brand that are utilitarian, that are useful to people's lives. They'll need your brand if they can't do it themselves or easily or better than you. Like, I am super not good with, say, sticking the vacuum hose down my heater vents here in the house to clean out the dust. I'm calling someone to do that. I am not risking destroying my furnace for something like that. Although it's not my furnace, because I don't own the house, as I said earlier. Let's go ahead and move forward. More suggestions from Matt include being discoverable. Use video and branded content, endorsements with personalities. Be local. Support neutral, non-political, local causes of importance to the community and promote it authentically. Now, we're in the middle right now of discussions about brands and social justice and things that brands are getting behind, both local, regional, and national. And those are important things to discuss with your consumers as well at this time. I mentioned neutral and non-political mostly because you want to focus first on local causes of importance if you're going to start anywhere. And the best place to start is to start somewhere that, again, is very neutral, very well understood and loved by everybody, so that you can build into things that are more important to you, that your niche parts of your customer base can help you support, or that your mass parts of your customer base can help you support because it's the right thing to do. But you have to work up to it. Let's go ahead and move forward to the next slide. More suggestions from Matt include being accessible. We talked about accessibility and technology, and that's how a lot of millennials learned their ability to love and use technology and become personal brands because of technology. For example, I would have never had that opportunity if it weren't for being in elementary school and being exposed to the first Macintosh Classic in the 80s. Well, it was the early 90s, somewhere in there. Without those computers, right now, I wouldn't be owning Mac and Apple products later on down the line the way that I am, because I had an early experience that was so positive and it was so accessible. It allowed me to become a bigger, a bigger advocate of the Apple brand. And now I love all kinds of technology because I had accessibility to it. But remember, clean up your digital house first. That's the biggest point of accessibility between you and consumers or potential consumers for your business. And be where your customers are. If your customers really are living on TikTok and you're not on TikTok, get on TikTok. And if you don't feel comfortable being on TikTok, there's an employee somewhere within your reins that probably is comfortable being on TikTok. Give them boundaries, have them help set you up, and be there. Make it extremely easy to purchase, as we talked about too. Make that friction go away. And again, tell them about it. Not one and done. Frequently, consistently. Be accessible to people in your marketing. If you show up and throw some radio commercials on the air for 1 month, even if you do it 5 times a day, 10 times a day, all 30 days of the month, and then you go away for a good 3 or 6 more months, that is not helping your brand be more accessible to people. That's not helping you communicate to them how to do business with you, how to lend credibility and earn trust to your brand and the purchases they hope to make. Let's go ahead and move forward. So how do I reach millennials? The millennials always want to work with authentic people and brands. This is a young picture of Michael Scott meeting, I think, Dunder or Mifflin. I can't remember which. If we move forward to our next slide, I'm not kidding you when I say this, but pretty much every piece of research that measures media and consumption, including our friends at Nielsen, have told us time and time again that millennials love radio. You would think that would be the opposite. It is not. And the reason is radio is free. Radio provides a great deal of enjoyment, experience, comfort, and more that millennials love and rely on, again, mostly because it's free. I don't have to pay for the Spotify subscription. I don't have to deal with Pandora. A whole multitude of things that make radio interesting and attractive to those in the millennial population. If you look further down the line, you would assume we'd be spending more time listening to things on apps, paying attention to social media, or even watching live or time-shifted television. That number is going deeper and deeper down the tubes because most people aren't watching time-shifted TV. They're simply switching to Netflix and nothing else in most cases. Let's go ahead and move forward. How else do you reach people that are in the millennial population? Well, you can do so by making your people within your brand an actual brand themselves. But remember, be authentic. You can't be Steve Buscemi from an episode of 30 Rock trying to fit in with the kids in high school. It has to be authentic. You have to speak their language and be authentically telling these stories that matter to them and giving them experiences that matter. And you can do that in most cases with people who, again, represent your brand as a brand themselves in most cases. Like maybe, let's say her name is Sophia and she is the front desk person or the receptionist who's the first person that every customer meets or talks to on the phone or engages with on social media when they come to do business with you or ask about doing business with you. Maybe Sophia is that brand. Maybe you can help her connect these people to your social video and branded content and again, become that part of the brand extension. And suddenly they might help you lend more credibility to your brand for not being millennial friendly a lot faster. Go ahead and move forward. Let's also reach them where they live. We want to build trust and credibility. So one of the best ways to do that is to let a radio personality endorse your brand. We have lots of people in almost every Midwest family market endorsing all sorts of different products and services to lend credibility to your brand, especially for millennials who need that credibility and trust, and they need to understand what your brand is about. Endorsements help do that, and they help do it faster, especially when paired with a branding campaign, a frequent and consistent great message that's on the air very often. Now, besides radio, one of the other places you can effectively reach millennials are, as we saw, on their devices. Targeted display and geofenced ads work really well. If we were in a non-COVID area, a lot of advertisers that want to reach, say, college-age students that are out there or those who work in higher education might draw geofence lines for their advertising around a major college or university, which we have in just about every town here that's on the Midwest Family Dash call today. Instagram and TikTok are also one of the biggest places where people live. I want to make sure that you know that right now, trust on social media, on Facebook in particular, is extremely low. If you're going to spend a lot of effort and time, I suggest moving forward to TikTok and Instagram if you can. Let's go ahead and move forward, Andy. Where else can you reach them where they live? Offer things like text message service to remind people of appointments, to help them get products and services or basic contact info, or a chance to get a hyperlink to fill out a form for more information, or use Facebook Messenger to contact them. I hate picking up the phone and answering voicemails and that kind of stuff. It's a utility that does exist for certain things that kind of has to be done. But in most cases, I'm living out of my text messages. I don't want to all the time, but it is pretty useful. And I can get to it when I want to. And please make sure that you ask people to be part of your databases, and especially email newsletters. Those databases are audiences you own. Those are people you can talk to without paying anyone except your email newsletter service anytime, or your CRM. Keep them close at hand in those databases. And physically, be active in your community. Join nonprofits, volunteer, and if it's not you, it's someone else on your staff. We have a lot of people at Midwest Family across all of our markets who are very actively involved in volunteer, church organizations, nonprofit boards, and many other places that allow us to be able to reach out further to the community and make sure we're serving the community appropriately. Your business can do the same. Millennials appreciate that cause marketing. Make an impression. Plan your daily impressions with your millennial consumers and prospects. And that can be in person at the point of sale, or in this case for some people during the point of pickup, social and digital channels, marketing channels, and customer experience channels. If you don't know where all those things are, take the time to lay out where each one of those things are, or ask your Midwest Family rep to help you. We've got plenty of resources to help ask you questions to pull those things out and understand what they are, help you make lists of where they are, and then develop a strategy that will help. Go ahead and move forward, Andy. So where do I start? You really, again, going through the whole presentation of things that need to happen, as we said, assess your brand and the products and services. How millennial friendly are they? How are you reaching those millennial populations with those products and services? Do you have anything at all that appeals to millennials within your products or services? If you don't, you risk your business potentially going further down the path of degradation along with the people who used to be your core customers in the 25 to 54 category of business, or in the luxury side, or in the value side of the proposition of the buying funnel. Just take a look at that very deeply and ask yourself some very serious questions about where you are with your brand and products and services. Analyze and improve your purchasing funnel. And again, use people to help you do that, whether that's consumer surveys, whether it's a secret shopper. Clean up that customer experience based on those responses from those people who gave you that data to help you understand where the customer experience is. And don't just do it once, do it often. Say every 6 months, 9 months, every year at the absolute least. Remove friction from the buying process as much as possible. Develop a customer journey strategy, which again, your Midwest Family rep can help. And then make sure that once you come up with that strategy, it is an investment. But if you do exactly what's outlined and you stick with it and you market it effectively, you will start beginning to get results that you can measure. And make sure you repeat it frequently, consistently, and authentically. Those are the most important things to take away from today. So later on, when you have an opportunity after this presentation is over in just a moment, you can listen to the podcast at midwestfamilyswmi.com/millennial-marketing. My contact info is there. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn in particular. If you hit me on any of the other channels, you're simply going to see pictures of my dog. If that's your thing, there you go. If we have any questions or answers that we need to provide for today, please let us know. I would be happy to field those. Just email webinar@midwestfamily-.com. Andy and TK will be happy to forward those to me. We'll get you more information, get you hooked up with your Midwest Family rep. Andy, anything else you want to mention?
No, we're a little bit over time here, Zach, so I really appreciate you investing the time and energy into this presentation, and I think a lot of us definitely got a lot of value out of it. It's always a good reminder to focus on that customer journey aspect and putting all the pieces together. So I really appreciate that. So
thank you. I appreciate it as well. And I apologize for being a little bit over, but radio people never end on time. Sorry about it.
Yeah, so I do want to mention that we will have this on YouTube by the end of the day tomorrow. So if you got value out of this, I'd appreciate it if you like, share, and comment on that video. Wanted to tee up next week's, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now, webinar. We're having Johnny Molson on for talking about message unification, making your marketing work harder. And Johnny Molson, if you're not familiar, he's a marketing consultant for a company called the Wizard of Ads. He is going to be talking about the topics there on the screen. He's written over 11,842 ads, and he's one of the most creative people I have ever listened to. So it's going to be a treat for everyone that attends. So I look forward to seeing you all on there. TK, anything from you?
Nope. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. See you in a couple weeks. Bye.